Let's say one day you are driving on your way home from work and you stop to pick up some food, and as you start slowly driving through the parking lot, you see a homeless man. He looks very down on his luck, and as your headlights pass over him and you catch a glimpse of his face, you realize he looks familiar, but it doesn't hit you right away until you drive off and it hits you later on. That looked a lot like actor Glenn Powell from the movie Top Gun Maverick. So you turn your car around and speed back to get a second look, and he's gone. Or let's say that it's a Friday night after a long work week, and you stop at the store to pick up your drink of choice, and as you walk out, a vagrant comes up to you and asks for some spare change. As you reach in your pocket to give him a few bucks, you notice that his clothes, although dirty and ragged, seem kinda new, and actually, you even notice that the man has no smell of alcohol or bad body odor. In fact, he looks sorta well kempt and handsome. Actually, he looks vaguely like actor Channing Tatum in some kind of weird homeless man disguise. If this has ever happened to you, then you experienced the conspiracy known as celebrity slumming. It basically theorizes that over the years, several celebrities, not just actors, anyone from musicians to billionaires, like to play this game where they, for lack of a better term, slum it up. The reasons why they do this tends to vary, but the main one of course is supposed to be a form of thrill seeking. Like these people begin to feel a boredom with their lives of being super wealthy and think going undercover as someone that has nothing and going around in a city for a few hours, or days, or even weeks will give them a rush of adrenaline they can find no other way. And they also know that they can abandon it at any time and go back to their lives of comfort and wealth. Now sometimes it's said the celebrities get together and discuss their adventures of slumming, while sometimes they just up and do it alone to see for themselves. Basically, think of it as poverty tourism. Another line of thought is they just do it to escape the limelight for a little while. The downside of being a celebrity is the paparazzi's always following you and people looking for autographs, wanting to say hi, etc. So the disguise of a homeless person could throw everyone off, and you could practically be invisible. Then we go to another suggestion, which brings out the more charitable celebrities, maybe those who campaign for donations to charities that help with poverty. These celebrities could be taking on the role just to get a first-hand look at the struggles, while others may do it to get a better understanding, possibly for a role as an actor. And as far as actual occurrences of this, there's some online conjecture that Justin Bieber and Miley Cyrus have been spotted at events like rainbow gatherings or Burning Man, yet they were both wearing disguises. Well, there's also claims that Zach Galifianakis has been spotted impersonating a homeless guy. And we also have Jared Leto, who's a method actor, who spent time with heroin junkies preparing for a role, and he later on stated he was basically homeless at that time. When it comes to conspiracies, one of the most famous and long-running ones is the depopulation theory, which of course suggests that the elite plans to depopulate the planet, getting rid of the vast majority of people that they consider are just a waste of resources. And this conspiracy, as scary as it is, has some basis in reality. It's known as the useless eaters theory, and the Nazis actually carried it out when they were in power, murdering around 250,000 people who had some kind of disability, whether it be with their mind, or blindness, or deafness, or even a mental illness. But it's that evil program that our conspiracy is rooted in, and is actually expanded. Not only are the targets people with disabilities, but now it's anyone who could be considered a burden on the planet's resources. The poor, unskilled laborers, people with chronic health issues, the elderly, all of these are now targets. And according to the theory, they are sought out by the elite, billionaires, along with companies and shadowy organizations that are funneling money into this secret program to slowly kill all these people. And how are they doing it? Well, according to the variation of this theory, they do it by releasing diseases into the population, or pandemics that may target a certain group, like seniors, or by promoting government policies that make it difficult to get healthcare, or by reducing the birth rates, either by promoting safe sex or any kind of vaccination, which they will claim is actually sterilizing people. And as mentioned, the reason they are said to do all this is because the planet's resources can no longer support the number of people, and plus, It's just easier to control a smaller population. And let's just say that this theory is true, but the methods are completely fictional. They're not releasing diseases or sterilizing people. Instead, their method is much more sneaky and devious. This gives us the theory known as fast food entrapment endgame, which suggests the fast food industry is working along with the elite to slowly depopulate the planet. Of course, everyone already knows that fast food is bad for you, and some say addicting, but this theory takes it a step further and suggests that as technology gets better and the restaurants refine their processes, they get closer and closer to creating a food that is not only addicting, but has zero nutrients in it, which of course means that a population that is hooked on this food continues to eat more and more while at the same time becoming malnourished, and ultimately in bad health and death, leading to population decline. And the theory can even be expanded to include processed foods from the store, not just restaurant, where every year the nutritional value in the groceries you buy drops a little more, leaving you with the bare minimum nutrition to survive, unless of course you buy organic foods, which are getting more and more expensive every year, and really shows the affordability gap between unhealthy options and organic options. Which brings us back to the larger point. Who is it that typically buys fast food and processed food more on the whole? That's right, those living below the poverty line. Because even in the poorest parts of the country, you can find a McDonald's or a store full of processed unhealthy food. That's one of the big points in this theory, that this food is typically aimed right at the ones that are not so privileged, the ones who may be a burden on society for these elite people, those who may even know that the food they are eating is bad, but they can't afford healthier options. And you see this now with the chronic health issues and obesity in the country, which leaves a small amount of healthy food for the middle class, while the people at the top take the best food only. Fortune magazine, which has been around since 1929, is famous for one particular release they have every year. That is, the Fortune 500, which details the top 500 profitable companies in America, something that it has been doing since 1959. And it's no shock that our next conspiracy starts here, because so many of these big corporations have their own conspiracies, some of them rather dark. But this next one takes on a different twist you might not expect, and that is, these so-called richest companies in the country don't turn a profit. Instead, these companies are engaging in practices that create the illusion that they are making a profit. Also, they can maintain control over the market and keep their own company from collapsing. Since they can usually predict the amount of revenue they will earn for a year, they can make the financials appear better than what they really are. They can also make it look like their debts are minimal, and really just make it seem like their company is killing it. Even if it appears the company is poor, they can repurchase their own stocks to artificially inflate share prices, knowing good and well that the company is not worth it. They just know they need to convince the investors it is, so they pull off pump and dump schemes or do some inside trading. And we know it's possible because some companies even plan what they call strategic losses, like engaging in price wars with a company that you want to put out of business. What better way than for a bigger company to sell their products for a loss, knowing the other company cannot afford to and will go under? We've seen that with Walmart. Some companies, again Walmart, even keep losing money by keeping some items priced very low, just so no other competitors can ever catch up. Or think about Netflix, Disney, and Amazon. Look at their streaming deals. You could get Netflix and Disney for under $30 a month. And if you have Amazon Prime, you already get their streaming. So considering these companies are making their own productions now, which cost millions and up to $1 billion, are they even turning a profit on these streaming services? Or is it just to make sure no competitors get their product on the market? Some companies may just be borrowing more and more money to keep things afloat, hoping to pay the debt off in the future, or possibly even buying up smaller companies or touting a product they consider innovating when in reality they know it will never work, all for the sole reason of looking like a company that is doing well. So much so, you don't even realize they have no real growth. Heck, they could even use the borrowed money to pay PR firms to come up with stories that would downplay any struggles with the company, while making their successes seem out of this world. But why do all this? That goes back to maintaining control over the market. Sure, the company might be doing bad now, but as long as no competitors can pop up, they'll be okay. And maybe someday, they'll even turn a profit again. Of course, these powerful group of elites working with the people from the government and financial institutes are all supposed to be working together to keep these companies on the top, which in turn allows the business world to dictate the legislation they want from politicians and basically guaranteeing they will get a bailout if they ever need one. And I know you might be saying, well, this data is public knowledge, and if they were cooking the books, they would get caught. But this was actually addressed already. Have you ever seen the 2015 film, The Big Short, featuring Christian Bale? Well, it was based on the book of the same name, and it's that book that makes the argument that these companies are so huge and complex that no one on the outside could ever accurately audit them, which leaves us with one option. We just have to believe whatever these companies tell us. And as you can probably imagine, that leaves the door wide open for a lot of fraud. But I'll leave it to you. Are these companies feeding us an illusion of success? This is our second Tor conspiracy since we started this series, with the first one coming back on part 2. In that segment, we discussed how Tor is really being used to capture people who insist on being anonymous, because they might be a problem for the government. And as we discussed there, Tor was actually created by the government, or maybe it's better to say, the Navy. Anyways, this next conspiracy takes a little different twist on that theory and suggests that Tor is not a honeypot, and instead, it's an old, outdated tool abandoned by the government. The theory basically revolves around the idea that outdated military technology is often released to the public. There's a lot of things that originally began as concepts in the military, and once it outgrew its usefulness and become old, the public was given access to it. For example, GPS. It has been around since the 70s, but wasn't released to the public until 1993. The EpiPen was designed as an antidote for nerve gas attacks in the mid-70s, before it was approved for the general public in the 80s. And of course, the Jeep, which was first introduced as a military vehicle in World War II before being released to the public a few years later. Which brings us back to our topic at hand, Tor, which was developed in the mid-90s and declassified and given to the public in 2002. Is it possible, since it was just handed over to the public to use, that they have long since abandoned Tor for something much more efficient? That brings us to Mariana's Web, which is supposed to be this more secure, deeper layer of the internet that only government people can use, especially spies, and of course, other powerful organizations. It's been floating around in the conspiracy circles for a few years now, and it's supposed to be completely hidden from the general public, hence why you have never seen any screenshots of it. And it's here that the users are able to engage in the most secretive of communications, or activities. Some forum users often claim it's based on quantum encryptions, and its current security makes Tor seem like a joke, hence the reason it was abandoned. Let's say it's late one night and you got the munchies. So you get up and go out to a local store or 24/7 restaurant and pick up some nachos and head home. Everything is going good until you pass your local Walmart and notice something strange in the back parking lot. It looks like men in military fatigues moving about. So you begin to wonder, what's up? And you decide to go get a closer peek. And as you make your way into the parking lot and drive around the back of the building, you see nothing. They all disappeared. And you are simply left to wonder, are you losing your mind? But what if there is another option? That brings us to the Walmart underground bases conspiracy, which sounds exactly like you think. Walmart, because of its large buildings and because of its strategic locations, it's built for another purpose, to hide underground tunnels used by the military or government. This can be staging areas or just complete secret facilities themselves, or possibly even just built for the elite in case of emergency situations, like a disaster. Likewise, if there was ever an invasion, the soldiers could just deploy equipment from Walmart and basically have every town in America defended. Some even take the conspiracy a little further and suggest that Walmart has an agreement to be used as a FEMA camp in case of martial law. And part of this belief might come from the fact that Walmart has long been a supplier to different federal agencies, with everything from general supplies to emergency relief services. And since they do that, then it's possible that they've agreed to do much more. in exchange for tax breaks. There's also allegedly all these weird sightings at Walmart of individuals who wander the aisles, or alleged sightings of people moving around in the store way past closing hours. This one is one of the more ridiculous ones. Did the Soviet Union win the Cold War? That's what this next conspiracy, called the Perestroika Deception, claims. Perestroika, for those of you that don't know, was a reform movement in the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s, and has since become synonymous with Mikhail Gorbachev. It was basically an attempt to restructure the entire economy of the Soviet Union to end the stagnation that had occurred since the early 1980s, and basically, the goal was not to end the communist planned economy, but instead to add some free market reforms that would help the economy become more efficient. But it didn't work, and actually destabilized the economy even more, and it didn't take long until the Soviet Union collapsed a few years later. Or that's what history tells us. But according to this theory, perestroika was never a genuine attempt at going away from communism. It was more of a way to reorganize it and a way to spread it much easier, and in a much less obvious way. So basically, perestroika was really just a smokescreen to make it look like communism was getting weak, when all it was really doing was adapting to modern times, and they found that it made more sense to fight capitalist nations, not through war, but in covert ways, behind the scenes, by infiltrating capitalist societies and spreading communist ideologies. This, of course, totally tricked the West, who believed the Soviet Union's collapse was the end of communism in the country, and did not realize it until it was too late, when it basically just morphed into a more subtle form of what we see today. And not only did it survive, it is now thriving in Western societies where people are being manipulated online every day, and it gets more and more alarming by the day. Almost every corner of the internet is now infested with Kremlin bots, 4chan especially, that are not only promoting communism as a viable alternative, but also creating fiction in all these Western countries, many times riling up citizens against their fellow neighbor. Edward Snowden is a name I'm sure you remember. He came to prominence in 2013 when working as a contractor for the NSA, who became burdened with the knowledge that America was spying on its own citizens. After trying to bring up ethical concerns through proper channels, he was promptly ignored. Finally, he had enough and flew to Hong Kong, where he did a series of interviews with journalists, where he showed them thousands of classified NSA documents which showed the various ways Americans were being spied on. Within a few weeks, he was charged with espionage, and the US revoked his passport so he could no longer run. However, he would fly into Russia 2 days later when they were more than happy to let him in and have asylum, and he would eventually become a citizen. And to this day, many citizens see him as a hero for his actions. But what if he is not a hero at all, and actually was doing exactly what the NSA wanted? That brings us to the theory that the Edward Snowden disclosures were a PSYOPs. That's right, it was all planned by the NSA and Snowden, who was an agent that was not only capable of pulling it off, but was willing to do it for national security purposes. And what do I mean by this? Well, we have to go back to Snowden's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. If you've seen that episode, you may remember a couple of things that Snowden discussed, like his interest in popular conspiracy theories, and how he had all this info available to him to search through. And so he did, first looking for files on alien contact, or what the heck the government was doing with chemtrails. And Snowden's answer was disappointing. He would tell Rogan that none of it existed, or at least, he, using all the tools at his disposal, never found one bit of information that showed that aliens had visited Earth, nor was there any proof for any of the other popular conspiracies, which leads to speculation that this was not a genuine whistleblowing act, and instead a carefully orchestrated move by the NSA. They thought by releasing highly controversial information, like spying on its own citizens, the NSA could distance itself from real classified activities like aliens, or their studies of geoengineering, which involves chemtrails. And since Snowden, through the use of media, becomes sort of a folk hero, his credibility was untouchable. No one even really tried to call him out on any of his claims, so when he said there was no alien contact, it probably caused a lot of people to stop calling for alien disclosure. But that's not even the biggest clue that this was a PSYOPs. That would be Despite everyone getting so upset with the government spying disclosure, nothing changed. The NSA still basically does what it wants without interference, and no one seems to care anymore. Likewise, if you recall in part 1 of this series, we actually discussed the possibility that Joe Rogan himself was working for the government as a disinfo agent, so it would make perfect sense for him to have Snowden on to proudly say, "There are no aliens, quit asking." But there's other odd things about Snowden's revelations. If he had all this access to the most sensitive files, why, instead of saying, "There are no aliens," did he not explain what was going on at Area 51? Why didn't he address rumors that have swirled around Project Blue Book? Instead of shooting down chemtrails, why didn't he talk about America's advanced weather manipulation programs? It seems like all his whistleblowing was pretty limited and was more of a way to use reverse psychology in hopes of dividing the conspiracy community up. And of course, the best way to hide something is to just discredit the people that are saying it, and it seems that could have been the whole goal here. How about a space conspiracy? If you're like me, you have probably never heard of the Boötes Void. It's also known as the Great Nothing or Great Void, and it's basically this huge area of space where hardly anything exists. It spans an area of 330 million light years across, but only has around 60 galaxies. And if you go by the rest of the explored solar system, then mathematically it doesn't make sense, because an area of space this wide should have at least 2,000 galaxies. It's one of the largest voids in the visible universe. Scientists have theories on how this void came to be, but no one's for sure, which has left the door open for conspiracy theorists. It's actually long been postulated by those of the fringe-minded that this void in space is because some alien civilization came in and harvested entire galaxies for their energy and resources, or whatever reason, sorta like Brainiac from Superman. But these aliens come in and build Dyson sphere structures to take the energy, which makes them invisible to our telescopes. It's also possible they just went into these galaxies, dismantled them, and took the raw materials and left. This theory has been around for a while, but it's mainly discussed by the more science-minded conspiracy theorists. But of course, we like to look at the lesser-known theories, and this one suggests that it has nothing to do with aliens harvesting resources from the Great Void. Instead, this void exists because it's what some alien civilization wants us to see. Let me explain. If there are really advanced civilizations out in the universe, it's completely possible they don't want mankind to have any evidence of their existence. So with their advanced technology, they begin to feed false data to our telescopes, satellites, and space probes via hacking or some kind of manipulation of signals. So the data we get about space might be completely artificial. What our deep space probes are sending back could just be full of false data, meaning Earth is basically kind of stuck in our own area with no real knowledge of the universe. Like we're in a zoo for these other civilizations to come by and look at sometimes, but we're never really allowed to see out. This would go on to explain why we have never had any conclusive signals from intelligent life. Take SETI for example, which has long searched for any kind of signals from space which might indicate life being out there, and they have never found a thing. Of course, that leaves the big question: why go through all that effort to hide from a civilization that you're so much further ahead of? June 27th, 1967. The United States Coast Guard, patrolling off the coast of Florida, would come across a very peculiar find. There it was, floating a little offshore, an 18-inch square crate. When they got closer and pulled it in, the crate was marked, "Made in the USSR," and was addressed to the Institute of Mineral Resources of Cuba. The box was estimated to have been floating for about 2 months, which investigators came to that conclusion after seeing the amount of barnacles all over the crate. This obviously put not only the Coast Guard on alert, but the entire US government. What had they found? Was this box full of Cold War secrets? Not that exciting. Actually, when they opened it, all they found was heavy yellow rubber balloons with a black rubber stopper on the ends. They were fully inflated and about the size of a cantaloupe. The Coast Guard was stumped and assumed some type of deadly gas was in the balloons. But when they investigated that, they found out that, yeah, it was just air. But the biggest clue was what the stamps on the box read, which indicated whatever was carried weighed around 110 pounds. This was critical because the crate with the balloons only weighed 30 pounds, leaving the mystery: what was in the crate with the balloons? And how did it get in the ocean? Did it fall off the ship? Doubtful, since nothing of value was in it, and it's more than likely that the Cubans, upon receiving the item, just threw the crate overboard. However, that doesn't explain the balloons. At first, you may think it was for packaging, but why would they put a stopper at the ends of them? That makes it seem more like it was meant to act as buoys, and basically ever since, people have brought up all types of conspiracy theories to explain what it was that was actually found. One of the earliest was that the balloons, which are so low-tech and unassuming, could have been perfect for carrying hidden microfilm, or maybe even some kind of encoded writing invisible to the naked eye. And it's possible a UA-sensitive ink or some kind of other technology might have been used to transmit secret messages between Cuban agents, or perhaps even sleeper agents in the US. Others suggested the Russians were testing an experimental delivery system, which could later be used to disperse biological or chemical weapons. And it's just possible the Russians intentionally dropped it off the coast of Florida, hoping it was discovered, just to see how the Florida population would react to something so mundane as finding balloons. While another line of thought was the whole thing was a Russian PSYOP to make the US government even more paranoid and potentially confused by what Russia was really up to, meaning it was nothing more than a crate with yellow balloons just to worry the US. But those are all old conspiracies that basically popped up right after the balloon's discovery. We are going to look at a different take on this weird conspiracy called Experimentation and innocuity, which suggests that the yellow balloons case was a government experiment hidden in plain sight. Basically, the balloons, which seem so innocent and mundane, are perfect for certain tests or projects the government wants to pull off, because in the chance that it is discovered, everyone will just think, well, it's balloons, that's harmless. Like most citizens at the time that heard about the balloons being found. They completely ignored it or made jokes about it because it's balloons, who cares? But what if these balloons were carrying tiny sensors or some kind of other tiny device that would allow them to collect data about how people react to something so strange as finding the balloons in the first place? Heck, maybe the devices could even try to alter your behavior. I mean, during the Cold War, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that governments were pulling psychological experiments like that. But that's where the theory gets crazier. The balloons are just one facet on this one, because if the theory is true, then that means there's tons of other little things you see in your everyday life that could be part of a government experiment. You sit down for a bite to eat on lunch and notice a gum wrapper sitting on the table next to you. But is that a normal wrapper? Or could it be concealing some tiny electronic that could be used to listen to your conversations? Or maybe it was just left out to mark a certain location for some other agent. Or maybe it's just a gum wrapper. See, that's the point of this one. It's all about hiding the extraordinary within the ordinary. Or in more simple terms, nothing is ever as it seems. In November of 2024, former host of The Tonight Show, 74-year-old Jay Leno, would become the focal point for this very bizarre conspiracy, which involved an injury he had received. That's right, upon going out into public, Jay would be seen wearing an eye patch covering a black eye, although unable to hide the entire left side of his face, which had a huge bruise covering it. According to Jay, on November 16th, while in Pittsburgh for a show performance, he got a hotel, and unfortunately, he had been dropped off and did not have a vehicle. So when he got hungry and began looking around for places to eat, he seen the closest location was 1.5 miles away, and instead of calling for an Uber for such a short ride, he figured he could just make the brisk walk over and get his meal. However, to get there, he had to walk down this big hill, where the 74-year-old lost his footing, tumbled down the hill, and hit his face on a rock. Very plausible story, but not to conspiracy theorists, who immediately suggested many darker alternatives. Some were not that unreasonable, like some who theorized that Jay owed the mob a lot of money over gambling debt, and someone was sending him a message. But we're going to talk about the really weird one, the Panda Eyes conspiracy, which states that Jay's black eye indicates some kind of secret ritual, initiation, or punishment by a secret society, usually the Illuminati. The name Panda Eyes comes from the appearance of the dark discoloration around the eyes that celebrities, politicians, or any famous person who suddenly appears in public with the unexplained facial injury. Sometimes, it's thought that the person somehow double-crossed the Illuminati or embarrassed them, and someone is sent to deal out the punishment. Or sometimes, it might just be done to test the person's loyalty or as an initiation to get in. Although, one has to wonder why it took 74-year-old Jay Leno so long to become a member. Others believe that the black eye is instead a badge of honor that celebrates that person's movement into a higher rank within the organization, which could be a little bit more believable in Jay's case, because it suggests he had possibly moved up to the highest tier of the Illuminati. But as we mentioned, Jay is not the only celebrity to have appeared like this. Maybe the most scary was when Pope Francis was seen with a black eye in 2017, which he claimed happened after the driver of the Pope-mobile suddenly stopped and caused the Pope to bash his head into the plexiglass shield guarding him. If the Panda Eyes theory is true, that would mean that the Illuminati, or whatever secret group, is also controlling the Pope, and possibly the entire Catholic Church. Of course, it's just as possible these are black eyes that came from accidents. And that brings us to the end of this installment of the Crazy Conspiracies video. I hope you enjoyed. Goodbye, and good night.